Today on the podcast, I have Amy Suto. Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Kevin.
I feel like for most people who I interview and work with, Hollywood would be the end of their story. Right? That's like this goal that they're all working towards, and they're like, I'm in Hollywood, I finally made it. Whereas with you, it feels like that's kind of the beginning of your story. So tell us about how this adventure that is your writing career over the last while actually started in Hollywood.
Yeah, so I thought as well. I'm like, end goal, Hollywood. I want to be a TV writer. I love long form television. I grew up in the golden age of television. And so I went to USC. I studied screenwriting. I did that whole path, got into the industry, started working as an agency assistant, worked my way up the ladder to showrunner's assistant, finally got my episode of TV. And then at that point, realized that it was not what I wanted. I think that the thing that really showed me that there was another path was when I was coming up in Hollywood as a TV writer, I was also moonlighting as a memoir ghostwriter. And so at the same
Mm.
time that I was being kind of like yanked around by certain kind of like elements of Hollywood, my ghostwriting clients started flying me out to go and write their stories and paying me 10 times more than I was making in Hollywood. So what I started to see is that my skills were valued more on the open market of freelancing versus kind of working for gatekeepers in something that wasn't leading me to someplace that was making me happy.
So you obviously talk a lot about this in your blogging and your books and whatnot, but obviously that's like a fairly risky perspective for a lot of people. There's a lot of people out there who are in these corporate safe jobs with a steady paycheck and predictability, and they maybe want to freelance, or maybe they're doing it as a side hustle or whatever. How do you find the courage, or what do you tell people who are facing that decision of stepping away from the safety of a predictable job into the world of freelance like you did?
Yeah, so the thing that I think that will help people the most when you're quitting a corporate job is diversifying your income in a way that's smart and feeds each other, where you're not splitting your focus. And the way that I recommend it, if you have any writing bone in your body, is to do these three things. One, immediately start building a paid newsletter, and my platform of choice is Substack. Two, use that paid newsletter to start to build up content for a book if you have any interest in putting together a book so that you can then sell that book to your paid newsletter audience. And then three, use that eventual book draft and then also your current paid newsletter to then have a portfolio for your freelancing, which will fund everything. And so those three pieces are what makes modern writers kind of like recession proof or AI proof. And it helps to have this ability to offset because if you lose a corporate job, that's one stream of income that you had and then don't have. However, if you have a paid newsletter and you have thousands of paid subscribers, nobody can just take those subscribers away from you, especially if you own your email list, which on platforms like Substack and Beehive you do. And so it's really important to like think about, okay, when I want something stable, what does that mean? What are the pieces that I need to put in place to build that? And then you'll actually have end up with something more stable than any corporate job could ever give you.
I think a lot of freelancers struggle with pricing themselves, and I suspect that's probably something you talk a lot about to people as well. How do you, as a high-paid freelancer yourself, how do you help people get over that psychological block of saying, "Am I really worth $750 an hour?"
Yeah, definitely. And I think that this is where I have in the book that I have coming out, Right for Money and Power, I spend the first third of the book just talking about mindset. And the whole thing with pricing is it is a mindset game. And it's something where you have to believe that your skills and what you're writing are valuable and your time is valuable. And understanding that you need to charge a competitive rate, even at the beginning stages of your career, is something that is all mental. It's a mental model you have to build. And it's something that I think that you have to work on in the identity level. So understanding, stepping into an identity before you're even there. So saying, I am a successful professional writer and I like that isn't my new identity, which means if you are a successful professional writer, you charge professional rates, you show up at your desk every day like a professional writer. Like you have to create things that then reinforce that identity. In the same way that like a fitness coach would tell you that you have to have the identity of being a fit person, a healthy person before you actually achieve that goal because you have to show up as them before you are them.
You mentioned that you started ghostwriting while you were still working in Hollywood. How did that whole side of your career start? What was your first ghostwriting gig, or how did you get into that world?
Yeah, so I was just freelancing on the side because in Hollywood you'd have like a show and then it would get canceled. You would have, a writer's room start and then end. And so there was a lot of in-between gaps that I had to fill with something. And a lot of my friends would fill it with, bartending or just kind of picking up side jobs. And I was really lucky to find freelancing because it ended up being this thing where I was starting just doing copywriting and content writing just on the side to see, what I could do to fill that gaps. But I ended up just really loving it. And my first ghostwriting client was actually somebody I was doing copywriting for. So I was just putting together a bunch of blogs for his website. And he was like, do you just want to write the whole thing into a book? And so I think that when it comes to freelancing, people think that there's like this big, complicated thing to get started on. But it is just simply putting yourself out there, trying different niches, and then building your career piece by piece.
I also worked as a ghostwriter, and I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. Writing in general is kind of an opaque industry, publishing at least, and so people really don't know much about it. And I know I always got some interesting questions or comments about ghostwriting. From your perspective, what are some of the big misconceptions people have about that work?
Yeah, well, quickly, what kind of ghostwriting do you do? I'm always just curious. I love meeting fellow ghostwriters. What kind of niche were you in for ghostwriting,
Uh,
Kevin?
Leadership and entrepreneurship primarily. So,
Nice.
generally, folks who were latter in their business careers and wanting to share the knowledge that they develop over the course of their careers.
Nice. No, I think that that's really interesting. And to kind of go off your question about like misconceptions in the ghostwriting space, like exactly, it's kind of like, I think it's really interesting because when you think about like an entrepreneur or a CEO, do they do everything in their business? No, they have people working for them. So it's if they are writing a book, are they really going to go on a writer's retreat, learn how to write, read Anne Lamont's Bird by Bird? Are they really going to do all that just to write their story? Like, no, of course not. Like they're going to need somebody to put together their story for them. And so ghostwriters are just, we're basically using our skills to help somebody do something that, they're not trained to do themselves, which is write a book or write something else. And I think that that's something that people like make it this weird thing sometimes being like ghostwriting, you don't own the work. It's like, no, it's the same way that if you're an architect and you build somebody's house, you don't own the house. It's just like a professional trade.
Absolutely. And the thing for me is, it's their ideas. We sit down, we interview these people, we worked with them for weeks or months, and so much of it is them that I never felt that kind of attachment to the work. Even if I was the one organizing it and writing it, it never felt like my work. It felt like I was facilitating their narrative or their ideas or their frameworks.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that that's thing is the same thing with like my main focus is memoir ghostwriting, but even though I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and it's like it's their life story. And so I think that like I almost see it as you're a journalist in someone else's life, but you're working for their version of reality. And I think that what's really interesting is that you're kind of like playing detective, like you're part therapist. Like it's kind of this really interesting role where you are also given this unique insight into somebody's life where you can learn from a top business leader or an Olympian or an NBA player and hear what they have to say that you would have to pay for their time otherwise. So I think that as a ghostwriter, you kind of have these perks of where you get to kind of like sample different pieces of people's lives and it's really fascinating. And that's why I always recommend it to people because this is such a field that is so high touch and so personal that I think that it is something that is just such a unique field that people will invest in because it is an heirloom. It's, a life story is an heirloom that is priceless. And so that's why it's a niche that with the rise of self-publishing these days is not going away anytime soon.
And you mentioned having worked with professional athletes and Olympians and these people who have been really successful in their lives and careers. I 100% agree with you. I learned so much writing for these people. And I'll give you one little story that I learned. I worked with a man, and he was talking about he grew up on a dairy farm. And he said every morning, his entire life, his dad got up and he went and he milked the cows. And it did not matter if it was snowing or a tornado or if he was deathly sick, he got up and he milked the cows because if he didn't, the cows were in pain. They need to be milked daily. And he said that mindset is like what's missing from so many entrepreneurs, so many different people, where it's like writers, I don't feel like writing today. I'm not inspired to write today. He was like, my dad was not inspired to get up and milk the cows every day. He did it because his livelihood depended on it and he loved those animals. And I think, I tell that story so often to writers because that's the mindset we need to get into writers. Get up every day and milk those cows, whether you're feeling inspired to do it or not.
I love that. No, I think that's such a great anecdote, Kevin. I think that there's this idea that we have to wait for a muse to strike or inspiration is going to come visit us out of nowhere. But in reality, I think that one of the benefits of being a freelancer is that you learn what it means to go and milk the cows every morning. You learn what it means to show up to your work because you have deadlines and clients and responsibilities. And then that is a lot easier to translate over into your own work as for a paid newsletter, for your own books, because you're so used to working in a more regimented schedule for your clients and you're seeing how just showing up on a schedule, the work comes easier. So when you do it for yourself, it just feels more second nature than something that is like terrifying or like very weighty.
What point did you start realizing you could teach these skills to others? We talked about you having worked in Hollywood and doing the ghostwriting, becoming a freelancer, doing sales copy and all of these things. But at what point did you say, I think I might be a teacher? This might be something I can pass on to others?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I know that I teach these things, but I don't always see myself as a teacher because I've always since the beginning of my journey just, the first $10,000 I ever made as a freelancer when I was still in Hollywood, I looked around to all my assistant friends and we were all making minimum wage and I was like, guys, I found a secret. This is like something that we can do. Let me show you what I've learned. And I would literally go on drinks with other assistants who were like, tell me what you're doing. And we would sit with our laptops and I'd help them build their Upwork profile. I'd help with them with their cover letters. So at every stage of my life, I've always just shown people what I'm doing to hopefully help them because that's the thing that always helped me is that I got into freelancing because I saw another blogger writing about her journey as a freelancer and when I saw what she was able to do I'm like oh I can do that too and same thing when I was building my Substacks I currently have a Substack that makes over $180,000 in annual recurring revenue and just over 3 years ago I started a YouTube series where I just put up one video every month starting from growing my Substacks from $0 and back then I had a goal of hitting $96,000 or 1,000 paid subscribers. And I spent like nearly 2 years posting like monthly videos being like, I don't know what I'm doing, but here's what I'm learning. And that method of just building in public is the way that I like teaching, is sharing people like what I'm actively doing, because I ascribe to this idea that we have to do really interesting stuff first and then teach people about it from that. And so for me, I've always like teaching has been a part of my process because it helps me learn. And I think that some of the best coaches and teachers like have like that kind of mentality of like trying to understand how to do the thing so that then teaching is just like an extension of it.
So you don't get concerned that by going on YouTube and going, I don't know what I'm doing, it takes away from your authority in any way? Do you feel like it humanizes you? Or because myself, I think I always want to look smarter than I am, Like I have a Tuesday call, it's a Q&A call, but I always beg people to ask the questions beforehand so I can go research really great answers for them. And I think it speaks to my concern about looking dumb. So tell me a little bit about that mindset of being willing to kind of fail in public or be valuable to your audience.
Yeah, I think it actually gives me credibility because I'm willing to go on in the internet and being like, hey, I don't know what is happening. Because I had a video on one of that series of growing on Substack where I literally got on camera and I'm like, I am failing. My annual recurring revenue dropped and I don't know, but here's some of the things I'm learning based on that. Here's the mistakes here that I tried this experiment, it didn't work out, and I don't think I picked the right niche. And so what I actually, in looking back at those videos that are still online for anyone who wants to see, I think that it shows the lessons and the things that I didn't know and the ones that I was learning in real time. And I think that my audience sees that over the course of nearly 3 years, I have like all of these mistakes and these lessons that eventually ended up for me having a top 25 best-selling newsletter, Make Writing Your Job on Substack, which makes nearly $200,000 a year. But that came from that journey of experimentation. And now these days, like I help other people grow on Substack through my other publication, Pseudoscience. But there I'm showing people, hey, it took me like 3 years to get here, but I can help you avoid all of that nonsense that I went through so you don't have to. And if you want, you can DIY it. You can watch my videos. You can see kind of how I got here, or I can just help you through it and give you the things that I saw actually worked, like the post-mortem, so that you can avoid that. So I'm always just trying to help save people time and avoid the heartache that I went through of failure. And that's what I'm always doing with my books is in my content is always just trying to help people avoid the pitfalls that I fell into so many times.
You mentioned you saw a friend having success with blogging and that kind of inspired you. And obviously, 10 years ago, blogging was the thing, right? Like every entrepreneur had a blog, writing and it was where things were at. And now it feels like so much has shifted to video. So, what's your argument or what's your response to people saying, oh, writing is dead, blogging is dead, all content generation needs to be on YouTube or TikTok? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think that if you go, I think Substack is a great place to see where writing is alive and well. If you go to the bestseller list, so you'll be able to see a lot of the bestsellers, like I think like position 50 and above are like near, if not all, 6 or 7 figures. And so you'll be able to kind of see the people whose publications people are paying for. There's a publication that's like top three on the literature list that is astrology and poetry. And that is like what people spend, $10 a month for to a point where they're making six, maybe 7 figures. And so I think that there's a lot of writing that people are willing to pay for. Even the fact that book sales actually increased in the last few years in certain demographics, we're seeing kind of a resurgence of Barnes and Noble. Like that was like about to like, crash and burn, but in the last few years, their book sales have actually increased. And so I think that understanding that the written word in certain areas are going to always flourish. And if you're finding the right target audience with younger generation, I can't speak for, but I think that there's still going to be this kind of hunger for offline time. And we're already seeing that with the younger generation of them wanting to get out from away from these screens that they're realizing are rotting their brains. And there's nothing wrong with video. Video is great. I love video. I've been doing a lot of Substack live interviews with authors and I think video is a great method to share ideas, but even great videos need to have an underpinning of a script, an idea, something that is either written or conceptualized through journaling. And so writing will never be something that disappears because good writing is good thinking.
When you say good writing is good thinking, how does that manifest in your process? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, that's like a Paul Graham quote that I love, and he's a technologist. And I think that that is a quote that I love because it is this idea that in order to write something great, you have to actually think deeply enough to write it. And for me, whenever I'm putting to like even like writing, books for myself, for my clients, I think protecting the space to think deeply through journaling, through offline time, through walks. Like I live in San Francisco and I love walking through the different parks here and kind of having that unplugged time. And that's what separates the writers who will be able to AI proof their business and the writers who won't. Because if you're merely just putting words on a page and not thinking about it, you're going to be replaced by a machine. But if you're able to think deeply and add that creative layer to your work, then you won't ever have to worry about your job going away as a writer because thinking is something that is so hard to do.
All right, well, let's dig into it. Let's talk AI. How does one AI proof themselves as a writer, and what role do you see AI playing in supporting writers and authors, if any?
Yeah, I think that AI is something that is like genuinely, I wouldn't say misunderstood, but is something that is a tool that is coming to help us in certain ways. But in other ways, I think that it is going to challenge the way that we've worked before. So when I was in the early days of my copywriting career, I did a lot of like write 3 versions of this ad that needs to be 100 different versions for the same image, like really monotonous work that I just wanted to tear my hair out. And I'm like, no person should be doing this. Like this is prime candidacy for an AI, generated content to take over. But the things that I've really loved doing in my career, not only the memoirs, but I also, I was also a fiction writer for this like experience that happened in Vegas, like this immersive show that was really beautiful. And like I've done a lot of really creative projects that I think that while AI can generate some things, it's not going to be able to have something be cohesive. It runs out of the context window.
In addition to being a ghostwriter and a nonfiction writer and running your Substack, you're also a novelist. Tell us a little bit about when you decided to take on fiction writing and novels as part of your career.
Yeah, so I've always written novels since when I was a kid, and coming up in Hollywood as a TV writer, I just love the long form storytelling, and that's what I loved about writers' rooms is thinking about how does this character's arc change over, 20 episodes, 4 seasons, whatever it is. And so for me, returning to novel writing this last year and a half has been just a joy. It's been so much fun. And so I've put out two fiction books. My first one is called The Nomad Detective, and it's a short story collection inspired by my travels as a digital nomad and all the true crime that I ran into, thinking about, oh man, this would be prime material for a detective to solve. And then the second is my romantasy book, The Ash Trials, which came out earlier this year. And so these books are something that I've just been blown away to get the reader reactions that I have. And I just feel so grateful, especially because I did like next to no marketing for them. And so I've been very lucky to have the readers that I've had. And I'm excited. I'm working on a sequel for both of them. And I know I think it's like so fun to be a reader or to be a writer and to have readers be bugging you about sequels. It's such a privilege. And I think that every fiction writer, every freelance writer who wants to write fiction should carve out the space because it's not something that's optional or fun or just something that is like, oh, like a cool thing to do. It's something that is part of your soul. If you're a writer and you have that urge to write fiction, you have to make time for it.
You often recommend that writers get into more of an entrepreneurial mindset. And obviously, romantasy is huge right now. So I was curious, was the decision to write a romantasy partially kind of writing to market? Was that a business decision to say, hey, this is what people want right now, so I'm going to give it to them?
Actually, no. I
Hmm.
in March of last year, I was on a plane flight to Seoul, South Korea, to hang out with a bunch of friends, and my partner Kyle had given me the first Akotar book to read on the plane, and I was like, I'm not reading this book. Like, I write thrillers and it's about spies. Like, I'm not a fantasy girl, let alone romance. Like, ew, get out of here. And then I read it, and then I was like, Kyle, I'm going to be up for the next 3 days and just read all of these books. I'm not going to stop. Like, I'm not going to sleep. Like, you enjoy South Korea without me and go hang out with our friends. Like, goodbye. And I think that it was something that it changed something in me because saw for the first time a genre that took women's stories seriously and it took falling in love not as a subplot but as a main plot that actually, explores some complex like emotions around who is the right person for you, abusive relationships versus, what does a healthy relationship look like? And it did that in a fantasy world. And I'm like, are you kidding? Like this is incredible. And so I think it just like unlocked something in me that then I'm like, all right, I'm spending this next year. And I read like 80 books in 3 months in the romantasy genre. And then I was like, I'm going to write one of these. So it truly came from a place of love. And I think that any writer who's just writing to market, I think is going to be, it is something that you're kind of, if you're stripping the joy out of it, I think your readers will feel it. Not to say that it doesn't work, but I think that you have to write something that you love first and foremost.
As someone writing fiction, nonfiction, memoirs, ghostwriting, online blogging, magazines, all these things, YouTube scripts, what does an average writing day look like for you?
Yeah, I batch things by project. So I depending on what my client workload looks like at any day, like I'll focus on, okay, here is the time I need to set aside for my developmental editing clients, for my ghostwriting clients, and I'll batch those first. And then from there, then decide, okay, am I working on my own book right now? And right now I'm in a stage of, talking about the book that I wrote, not writing it. So I have less writing time, more time having great conversations with people like you, Kevin. And so this is kind of every day it kind of ebbs and flows depending on, am I preparing for a book launch? Am I, writing my own book? Do I have client deadlines, things like that? And so I've just been very lucky to, even a few months ago, I just took 6 weeks off to go hang out in China and then just let everything just go and then came back and picked up where I left off. So I really do prioritize a flexible schedule, which you can get with having the model that I talk about in my book, Write for Money and Power, which is the paid newsletter, the self-published book, and the freelance career.
Well, let's dig into the book. We're going to be releasing this interview right as the book is coming out. Super exciting. Congratulations.
Thank
First
you.
off, I think it's a pretty provocative title. So tell us about the title of the book.
Yeah, so the title is called Write for Money and Power. And I wrote it because I wanted to show people that you as a writer can step away from the starving artist myth and learn how to make seven figures without having to be, submissive to these gatekeepers that want to take all of your ideas and hold you hostage in golden handcuffs. And I love the title Write for Money and Power, especially coming from me. And I think that I'm not somebody who likes power. And I think in the traditional sense. Instead, I like power in the sense of I like to be able to have a schedule that I can choose what I do, whether it's traveling or spending time with the people that I love or taking a day off or whatever that I want. And I think for my readers, I really want people who are writers to know that they can have the types of lives that they have only dreamed of. They can make it possible through writing with smart business decisions that then cradle their creative soul.
You mentioned the first part of the book is mindset focused. So
Yes.
what are some of the big pieces of advice, or maybe your favorite piece of advice that comes out of that section of the book?
Yeah, one of my favorite pieces is actually an entire chapter talking about haters. And I think that if you're a writer, you are going to be receiving the critics are going to come for you no matter if you're self-published, traditional published, you have gatekeepers or not. And I think that a lot of the clients that I work with, my memoir ghostwriting and developmental edit clients, we have to have these conversations about, okay, the book is going to come out. You're going to get one-star reviews. People family members often will come out and maybe have some things to say about your memoir or your novel. And here's the things that you have to know is that all throughout history, there have been famous artists and musicians who have been ridiculed in their time, and now they are the curriculum. And so it's really understanding and putting in perspective that it's not the critics whose voices echo in throughout centuries. It is truly the artist doing the bold work. And so that reframing of, hey, you're going to get the critics, but they don't, the criticism does not matter from them. Like your work and the boldness and the authenticity of your work matters. So you just can't listen to that. And I think that that mindset shift helps when you're hitting publish and you're like, oh man, are people going to like what I'm writing? Like I feel that way all the time. That imposter syndrome comes for us all. But when it comes to this idea of being able to set aside the critics and know that they're going to come for you and it doesn't matter. And I think that that is something that once you build that, it will change your life and allow you to be free as a writer.
An analogy I often use that you might appreciate as someone who works with athletes is when I think about haters or when I'm experiencing it, right? That you put anything out into the world, people are going to come after you. What I say to myself is there's people on the field of life or the rink or the NBA court. And then there's the people in the stands cheering or booing or whatever they're doing up there. And it's like, who do you want to be? I want to be on the court. I want to be on the field. I want to be the person trying to catch the ball. And I don't care what they're saying up in the stands, right? They're going to boo or they're going to cheer. But that's not who I want to be. I want to be the creator. I want to be the person putting stuff out there, not the person standing on the sidelines of life watching other people do things.
I love that, Kevin. That's great. I feel like yeah, that's great. You have some great metaphors today. You're on fire.
Well,
Milking cows, the stands, love it.
well, we dug into the first part of the book, the mindset side of things. What's the other sections of the book look like? What do you cover?
Yeah, so the rest of the book covers topics for the three pillars. So, how to build your paid newsletter, your freelancing career, your self published book in tandem so that it isn't this huge thing where, like, oh, now I have to write a book. Now I have to do this. Now I have to do this. It's like, no, step by step, here's how to scaffold them so that they are all supporting each other so that you can do all three, but you're reusing pieces from everything. And a lot of the work that I do with my memoir ghostwriting clients is hey, if you have a book coming out, why not start a Substack or a paid newsletter where you're releasing snippets of the book to one, build your audience, and two, have your true fans start to pay for your work so that they can support you. And then they'll pay monthly for your newsletter and then also pay for the book. So I think that when people are thinking about, oh, I want to be a writer, they think about one piece. They think about either freelancing or the book or a paid newsletter, but they don't actually put all of them together. And so that's what this book is, how this book is different is I'm trying to scaffold that so that people can build truly sustainable careers where they can do what they love, they can write what they love, and they can have the money and power to build the life that they love.
I think that blog to book framework can be really helpful for writers who are overwhelmed with the idea of writing a book, right? It's like
Mhm.
writing a book, it's a huge thing, but like writing a chapter a week or a month or whatever, right? And then letting the book grow in that manner, I think, can be a great way to chunk things down in a manageable approach for folks. Is that what you found?
Yeah, I mean, I even think that it's a great way for distribution too. Like Andy Weir wrote The Martian chapter by chapter. And so I think that there's so many, and even in history, I talk about some examples in history of how different authors, like even, the different ways that they serialize their stories in the newspaper. And so serializing stories for audiences is nothing new. It's just something that has kind of changed the way it's distributed now. And we actually have a bigger access to a larger audience because of the internet, because of these platforms. And so I actually think this is a golden age of writers and writing and the way that we can distribute our work and become part of the creator economy. And so my book kind of focuses on how do you join the creator economy, hold on to your IP and your rights, monetize with audience, find your 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 true fans, and not have to give away huge chunks of your earnings to an agent, a manager, a lawyer. Like I have found it crazy that in Hollywood, lawyers take a percentage of your work. Like they do not work the whole project. They just come in and do your contract and peace out, and they take a percentage, like pre-tax. Crazy. So, and same thing with agents and managers. And so instead of giving up like so much of your money pre-tax as a writer, you can then keep all of that and then just invest in writing directly to your audience. And that's the future. And when we see that like huge fantasy authors like Brandon Sanderson are self-publishing on Kickstarter and, earning tens of millions of dollars, Taylor Swift self-published her tour book. Like if people are like that caliber are subverting gatekeepers, like what does that say about the rest of us and what we should be doing?
What is the big promise of the book? What are people going to take away from it?
Yeah, the big promise is that if you are a beginner writer, if you're an expert writer, it doesn't matter where you're at on your journey. We all deal with the same demons. The book is going to help you start from where you're at, meet you where you're at, and help you build the scaffolding for a successful, sustainable career as a writer, where you do not have to have a corporate job, you don't have to go work for someone else, and you have the money and the power to live the life that you want.
I'm curious, did you publish portions of the book on Substack before you published the book?
Yeah, I did. And so I was something that I was workshopping bits and pieces of, but I think that for me, in my writing process, I also just move so quickly that it's not something that I need that much of that workshopping. And so, but I think originally the book started as I was just going to add on a few chapters to the last book that I had published, Six Figure Freelance Writer, which I had published a few years ago. And I was just like, I'm just going to add some chapters. But then I was like, nope, this is a whole new book. And so I think that for me, my writing process is just something that I love writing fast and I love adding and kind of coming up with things as I'm seeing them. But yes, I did do some workshopping on Substack.
You mentioned you move fast. You obviously are juggling a ton of things. Two questions based on that. How do you move so fast, and how do you avoid burnout in the process?
Yeah, well, I'm really lucky that I work with like I don't work by myself like in all areas of my life. I'm lucky that I work with my partner, who's now my fiance, and we're getting married this year. And
Congratulations!
thank you. And so we've been business partners forever. We were business partners before we started dating. So we've worked together forever. So the two of us run our Substacks, Make Writing Your Job and pseudoscience. And then I also have a team. I have an assistant that helps me with stuff. I have a wonderful publicist that is helping me with the book launch. So I have a team of people around me, and while you don't need a team to scale a writing career for the where I'm at in my career, it's definitely really helpful because I'm wanting to do a bunch of different types of projects.
For someone who's not at that stage yet, they don't have $1 million writing business yet. How do they try to mimic your level of productivity or the amount of things that you're able to do in on different platforms? Where do they start with a goal of getting to where you are?
I don't even think it's about mimicking productivity. I think it's understanding the power of focus. And
Mm.
this is something that I did not do early on. And this was part of the thing that really hurt me earlier on in my journey and took me longer to get to where I am today. Instead of doing 10 different projects, it's about focusing on one at a time because in the words of James Clear, unfinished projects don't compound. And so if your focus needs to go from a lamp to a laser. And another book I love about this is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. And so really understanding that you have to focus your energy on one thing at a time and really crush it on that one thing and not allow fear to pull you into a different direction. Because as writers, fear can be this huge, just like wave of, oh no, what if this project doesn't work out? What if I'm doing something wrong? And if you're focusing your energies on building the scaffolding one piece at a time for the paid newsletter, and then once your paid newsletter hits a certain point, then you start weaving in the self-publishing pieces and keeping everything really small and focused rather than being like, I'm going to write a script, I'm going to write a novel, I'm going to write this thing over here, I'm going to go work with this person. Like I struggled from that, and I saw so many friends in Hollywood just sabotage themselves by just doing a million things because that's what's recommended by the gatekeepers. They're always like, more irons in the fire, do 5 projects at once. And it is really keeping you docile and kind of like controllable from them. And then also keeping you from pouring all of your life force into a smaller scope of projects.
Given you're largely speaking to creatives, writers, you seem very comfortable talking about the financial side of things, which I know sometimes artists feel very icky or uncomfortable about. Can you speak a bit to your just comfort talking about money and the business aspects of being part of a creative economy?
Yeah, I think that the reason why, like, I started freelancing when I read The Freelancer's Year by Lindy Alexander, and she's an Australian travel writer. And this was back in 2012, I think, or 2013. She used to post monthly income statements. And seeing her monthly income statements and seeing what she could do with travel writing, I'm like, oh, if she can do that with travel writing, I can definitely do that with some sort of freelancing. And so I do think that for me, I wouldn't have started freelancing had I not seen somebody sharing their numbers and actually start to conceptualize, okay, well, how much can I make from this? Because when you Google online, how much does a freelancer really make? You're not really sure. And you want to know both the ceiling of what's possible as well as what is like the average. And that's why on Make Writing Your Job right now, we're running what we're hoping is going to be the largest rate transparency survey like of this last year with our 25,000 writers in our community to have accurate kind of representations of what are people making, where are they making that money from, where are they getting their freelance jobs, or if they're doing grants, residencies, contests, like what does their earnings look like? And so for me, I think it's important that we talk about money as creatives and kind of shed some light on this so that we can know, okay, what is actually working for people, what is successful, what is not, what niches are good versus what is kind of dying off. And so I think that we have to have these conversations to help each other, and it's a public good to talk about money because there's no other, data that we can just point to or share about how to make a living as a writer.
Mm. Yeah, it's such a great point. With this idea of power being about autonomy, right? Power over your own life and not giving away your creative power to others. It's like that whole idea of within a corporate structure, it always serves the business to have people not talking about what anyone's making. Whereas here, you're talking about on your freelance platform that you've built, these are creatives helping each other, working together, and transparency is only going to help the average person because there isn't a CEO at the top, hiding all the real numbers.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that is so cool about being a solopreneur or a freelancer or people kind of who are we're all building our businesses together is talking about money is talking about, oh, like I had a one of our writers who recently just started freelancing like 6 months ago and she's just had her career take off. We were all on a mastermind call as part of Make Writing Your Job, and she was like telling the other people on the call, she's like, you guys need to triple your rates. You have no idea what you can make in developmental editing. Like it's crazy right now. Like you're charging way too little. And I love that. I love people hyping each other up and being like, this niche, this type of clients charge way more. And I think that that's something that we can only hear from each other. Like we're only gonna be helping each other by understanding more about the market and what's changing on such a quick basis. Because with writing and freelancing, this stuff does change quickly. And so having that information, having a community around you is something that I'm really passionate about because it can be really lonely. And I was really lonely starting off as a freelance writer, being like, I'm just in my apartment typing. I don't know what everybody else is doing. And so it's always been my goal. And I'm so grateful to be building communities around creating stuff and writing stuff and talking about these taboo topics.
A lot of writers listen to this show, obviously, but also a lot of writing coaches and editors and folks who work with authors. And I just want to reiterate that message you just gave about raising rates and the need to charge more. And I would argue that almost all of the writing coaches I know are extremely passionate about the work and they want to do the best work possible. And the reality is, what higher rates does is gives you the elbow room to do the best work possible, to do the deep work that you were talking about in terms of really focusing in on six clients instead of 60, right? It's like we do our best work when we have the financial stability to really be able to focus and not be pulled in a thousand different directions. So that, it's taken me a decade to learn that, like of slowly inching my rates up bit by bit by bit. But hopefully someone's out there listening to this and, like you said, can learn from our experiences and just go, not only can you make a living, not only are you worth it, but also you're going to do your best work when you're financially stable.
Yeah, and I just want to underscore like the importance of coaches and I've hired coaches in the past and paid for education because I do think that coaching is valuable. And I think that it's at the right stage in your journey, it can just be a force multiplier and something that can make the process of because even if you're a first time writer and you're writing a book for the first time, having a writing coach is so valuable. And so I think that education is something that, people like to be like, oh, well, I can just learn on the internet for free. Totally. Yes. And I've learned a lot on the internet for free too. But when you're wanting that kind of like ability to shortcut the pain of failure or having somebody to help you through something, I do think it's really worth it. And so I think that there's a lot of instances where as a freelancer working as a developmental editor or working in a supporting role to the author, like you are not only their, the person that they've hired, but you're also a sounding board, you're a friend, you're a collaborator. And I think that that is something that is so valuable. AI can't do that. That is something that a technical component of like a software cannot handle that kind of human element that a lot of people are craving, especially in our modern society where the loneliness epidemic is higher than ever. And if you're a creative doubting your work, then having somebody in your corner is going to be really important.
The book is out now. As people are hearing this, where can people look for you and where can they get the book?
Yeah, so they can find the book at amysuto.com/power or Amazon, Waterstones, Barnes& and Noble, everywhere. So the book is out everywhere. And then people can join our community of writers at makewritingyourjob.com, where we have the writing job board and do things like the rate transparency survey and report. And then I also run my Substack, Suto Science, so my last name, Suto, and the word science, where I have creative experiments and also talk about what I've learned about growing on Substack.
I love it. Well, Amy, you're obviously a very busy person, so I so appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on the show and talk about all these incredible lessons that you've learned and projects that you have on the go. And I can't wait to pick up my copy of the book. I'm really looking forward to reading it, and I know the listeners will as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's been wonderful.